High above the world, where the air was thin and crisp, stood a mountain. This was not a gentle mountain of rolling green hills. It was a fortress of granite and shadow, its peaks clawing at the sky, its slopes dense with ancient, whispering pine trees. And on a ledge partway up this formidable place sat a small log cabin. It was here that a man named Elias lived. His home was a solitary outpost against the vastness of the wilderness, a quiet kingdom of one. Elias was a man carved from the same stone as his mountain. His hands were broad and calloused, mapped with the scars of a lifetime of hard work. A thick beard, more gray than brown, covered much of his face, but nothing could hide the quiet sorrow in his eyes. Those eyes had not always been so sad, but the reason for their sadness was a story Elias kept locked away deep inside, a story the people in the distant town below could only guess at. They knew of him, of course. They knew he had once lived among them, a long time ago, before a great sadness had drawn him up the mountain path to disappear into the silence. They called him the Lonely Mountain Man, and spoke of him in hushed, sometimes in kind tones. They thought him strange and gruff, a hermit who preferred the company of trees to people. His days followed a simple, unchanging rhythm. He rose with the sun, his breath puffing in the cold air of the cabin. He would chop wood for his fire, the steady thunk of his axe, the only sharp sound in the muffled morning quiet. He tended a small garden in the summer and hunted and trapped in the winter. His evenings were spent in a worn chair by the stone fireplace, the flickering flames his only companion. The wind moaning through the eaves was his music, and the stars, scattered like diamond dust across the black velvet sky, were his nightlight. His only friends were the creatures of the forest, a red fox who sometimes visited at the edge of the clearing, and a great horned owl who watched him from a high branch. He was, in his heart, profoundly lonely, but he had long ago accepted this solitude as his permanent lot in life. As constant and unchanging as the mountain beneath his feet, the turning point began with a practical need. The first chill of the coming winter bit at the air, a sharpness that promised deep snows. Elias's stores were running low. With a sigh that was part reluctance and part necessity, he prepared for the long trek down to the town. He pulled on his heaviest coat, a garment of worn wool and leather, and set out on the winding path he knew so well. The journey was quiet, filled only with the crunch of his boots on fallen leaves and the occasional scolding of a squirrel. The town, when he finally reached it, seemed louder and brighter than he remembered, a jarring contrast to his mountain silence. He moved through the streets with his head down, quickly gathering the items he needed: salt, flour, nails, wanting nothing more than to turn back for home. His path to the general store, however, took him directly through the main square. Unusual crowd had gathered there, their voices creating a low, buzzing hum. Curiosity, a feeling he had long suppressed, pricked at him. He moved to the edge of the crowd to see what was happening. In the center stood a severe-looking woman he did not recognize, her posture rigid and her mouth a thin, stern line. Beside her, huddled together for warmth and looking terribly small, was a line of children. Their faces were pale, their clothes thin against the cold. Understanding settled over Elias like a heavy weight. It was an auction day. This was where children from the orphanage, with no families to claim them, were presented in the hope that someone would offer them a home and a future. A painful knot tightened in Elias's stomach as he watched. One by one, the stronger, healthier children were chosen. A burly farmer took a boy to help with his livestock. A kind-faced woman led away a smiling girl. With each departure, the line grew shorter, and the remaining children looked more forlorn. Soon, only one child was left. She was the smallest of them all, a girl who could not have been more than 7 or 8 years old. She kept her eyes fixed on the ground, her shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear. Her legs, he noticed, were thin and bent awkwardly, making it impossible for her to stand straight. The woman from the orphanage placed a hand on the girl's shoulder, her voice clear and cold as she addressed the dwindling crowd. She said this one was called Liora. She said she was weak and useless for work. She said no one had ever wanted her. A fierce and unexpected wave of emotion rose in Elias's chest. It was a mixture of profound sadness for the child and a hot anger at the crowd, at the woman, at a world that could declare a person unwanted. He saw not a broken body, but a profound loneliness that mirrored his own. Without a single thought for the consequences, without a plan, he acted. His rough, unused voice cut through the murmuring silence. "I will take her," he said. All eyes turned to him, wide with shock and disbelief. He ignored them. He stepped forward, placed the coins he could spare into the woman's surprised hand, and walked toward the girl. He knelt, his large frame making him seem even more imposing, and carefully wrapped his own heavy coat around her small, trembling shoulders. Then, with a gentleness that surprised even himself, he lifted her into his arms. Without another word to anyone, he turned his back on the stunned crowd and began the long, slow walk back up the mountain, carrying the fragile, unwanted girl toward the unknown. The journey up the mountain was made in a deep and heavy silence. The little girl, Liora, did not make a sound. She was as still and as light as a bird in Elias's arms, her small hands clutching the rough fabric of his shirt. She was terrified of the giant, bearded man who had taken her, her mind filled with fearful stories of what might happen now. When they finally reached the small cabin, Elias shouldered the door open and stepped inside. He set her down gently in the large, worn chair by the cold fireplace. She immediately drew her knees up to her chin, making herself as small as possible, and stared at the ashes in the hearth. Elias felt a deep and unfamiliar panic. He was a man of few words, who knew the language of trees and seasons, not the language of frightened little girls. He did not know how to comfort her. He moved about the cabin, building a fire to push back the evening chill, preparing a simple broth for them to eat. He gave her a cup of water and a thick slice of bread. He showed her the small cot he had prepared for her in the corner, heaping it with the softest furs he owned. He did all of this with a quiet efficiency, speaking very little. His actions, however, were careful and kind. He never raised his voice. He never grabbed or forced. He simply made space for her. Days passed in this same quiet pattern. Liora began to realize slowly that she was not in danger. The mountain man was not going to hurt her. He was just very, very quiet. The fear in her eyes began to soften into a watchful curiosity. One evening, as she sat staring into the dancing flames of the fire, a deep sadness settled over her small face. She missed the other children from the orphanage, even though they had not been kind. She felt the aching loneliness of this new, strange place. Elias watched her from across the room. He saw her sadness and felt a powerful urge to fix it. Though he did not know how, his gaze fell upon a small block of pine wood and the sharp whittling knife he used to make kindling. An idea, simple and clear, came to him. He picked up the wood and the knife, and sat in his own chair opposite her. He began to carve. The only sounds in the cabin were the crackle of the fire and the soft, steady scrape of the blade against the wood. Liora watched, her curiosity growing. She saw a shape begin to emerge from the block as his skilled hands carefully shaped it. After a long while, he blew the dust away and held out his creation. It was a small, perfectly carved owl, its feathers detailed with tiny grooves, its eyes wise and kind. He offered it to her. Liora hesitated for only a moment before reaching out. Her small fingers closed around the smooth wooden figure. She looked at it, then up at the serious, quiet man. For the first time since arriving on the mountain, a tiny, fragile smile touched her lips. It was not a big smile, but it was enough. In that moment, without a single word being spoken, a bridge was built between them. The small wooden owl was the first gift, the first word in a new and silent language they were learning to speak together. The harsh mountain winter eventually began to loosen its grip. The deep snows melted, revealing patches of dark earth and the first brave shoots of green grass. Icy streams, once silent under a thick layer of ice, began to gurgle and sing with the joy of their newfound freedom. Inside the cabin, a similar thaw was taking place. Liora was no longer the silent, terrified ghost of a child she had been. She followed Elias around the small cabin, her wooden owl always clutched in one hand. She began to talk, her voice at first a small and hesitant thing, but growing stronger each day. She asked questions about everything. She wanted to know the names of the birds outside the window, why fire was hot, and where the sun went at night. Elias, though he still spoke in short sentences, answered her as best he could. He found a strange comfort in her chatter. It filled a silence he had not realized was so empty. One bright afternoon, Elias was mending a chair leg near the open door, enjoying the warmth of the sun on his face. Liora sat on the step beside him, watching a young fox kit tumble and play in the meadow beyond the garden. The little creature was full of a boundless energy, running in wild circles and leaping after butterflies. Liora watched it with an expression of such deep and aching longing that Elias stopped his work. Her small shoulders were slumped, and her hand rested on one of her bent legs. She did not say anything for a long time. Then she sighed, a sound far too heavy for such a small girl. She spoke her wish to the quiet air, not really expecting anyone to listen. She said she wished she could run, just once. She wanted to feel what it was like to chase the fox, to feel the wind in her hair, to have her own feet carry her across the meadow instead of always being carried. She wanted to feel the cool grass under her bare feet. Her simple, impossible wish hung in the air between them. Elias looked at her. He looked at his own large, rough hands. He thought about the past, about a time before the mountain, when he had used these hands not just for chopping wood, but for creating. He had been a carpenter. He had built furniture known for its strength and beautiful simplicity. He had once been able to look at a piece of wood and see the hidden shape within it, waiting to be set free. That part of him had been locked away with his sadness for 20 years. He looked from his hands to the pile of fine wood scraps near the fireplace, leftovers from his winter chopping. He looked at the old toolbox, dusty and forgotten, in a dark corner of the cabin. An idea began to form in his mind. It was a wild, seemingly impossible idea, but it took root and began to grow with a fierce urgency. He turned to Liora, his voice quiet but firm. He told her he had to work on a special project in his woodshed. He said it would take time, and he needed her to be patient. He asked her to trust him. Curiosity sparked in Liora's eyes, pushing the sadness away. She nodded, her trust in him now complete. From that day on, whenever Liora was occupied with reading or resting, Elias would disappear into the small, cluttered shed behind the cabin. The sound that came from within was not the loud crash of splitting logs. It was the gentle, patient sound of a craftsman at work. The careful scrape of a plane, the soft tap of a mallet, the rhythmic scratch of sandpaper. He was building a secret, and he was building it for her. The secret work in the woodshed continued for many weeks. Spring deepened its hold on the mountain, painting the meadows with wildflowers and filling the air with the busy hum of insects. Liora's curiosity about Elias's project grew with every passing day. She would sometimes sit just outside the shed, listening to the mysterious sounds of careful sanding and soft hammering from within. She never tried to peek, honoring her promise to be patient, but the waiting was terribly difficult. Elias would emerge for meals with sawdust in his beard and a thoughtful, focused look in his eyes. He seemed to be remembering a part of himself he had long forgotten. Finally, one morning, when the sunlight was particularly golden and the air was sweet with the scent of pine, Elias opened the woodshed door. He did not come out empty-handed. He was carrying something made of wood, something complex and beautiful. He walked over to Liora, who was sitting on the cabin step, and knelt down on the earth before her. In his hands were not the simple crutches she had sometimes imagined. What he held was a pair of elegant wooden braces, curved and shaped with incredible care. They were sanded so smooth they seemed to glow. He had fashioned strong, flexible joints at the knees and ankles from cleverly carved wood and supple leather straps. The cradles for her legs and feet were padded with the softest rabbit fur. His voice was gentle as he explained. He told her these were not meant to fix her, because she was not broken. He said they were a new set of legs, a pair of wings to help her walk and run. He asked if he could put them on. Liora, her eyes wide with wonder and a little bit of fear, nodded silently. With a tenderness that spoke of his deep care, he carefully fastened the braces to her legs, securing the leather straps. They fit perfectly. He stood and held out his large, calloused hands to her. Tentatively, she placed her small hands in his. He pulled gently, helping her to rise. For the first time in her entire life, Liora stood on straight, strong legs. She looked down at her feet planted firmly on the ground, and a gasp escaped her lips. Elias did not let go. He guided her, one slow, shuffling step at a time, across the floor of the cabin. It was strange and frightening and wonderful all at once. Her new legs felt both foreign and empowering. Their practice became the new rhythm of their days. Elias was endlessly patient, his strong grip always there to steady her. One step became two. 2 steps became 10. Soon, she could walk the entire length of the cabin without holding on. Then, she took her first steps outside onto the soft grass. The world looked different from this new height. She felt the sun on her face and the solid earth beneath her feet. And then, on a day filled with the promise of summer, it happened. Liora was walking beside the garden, her hand in Elias's. A brightly colored butterfly fluttered right past her nose. Without thinking, without a moment of fear or doubt, she let go of his hand. She took a deep, joyful breath, pushed off with her strong wooden legs, and ran. She ran after the butterfly, her laughter ringing out through the clear mountain air, a sound of pure, unbridled joy. She was clumsy at first, her strides uneven, but she was running. Elias watched her, this tiny girl chasing a butterfly through a field of flowers, and the sight filled his heart so completely he thought it might burst. He had not just given her the ability to walk, he had given her freedom. The height of summer arrived on the mountain, a season of long, golden days and nights filled with the chirping of crickets. Liora's confidence grew with each sunrise. She was no longer just walking or running. She was exploring. She climbed onto low, flat rocks to feel the sun warm them. She practiced balancing on a fallen log Elias had rolled near the cabin. Her world, once confined to the floor of an orphanage and then the single room of a cabin, had expanded to encompass the entire mountainside. She was a whirlwind of motion, her laughter a constant melody around their home. One morning, as they sat eating breakfast, Elias looked at her with a thoughtful expression. He told her he thought it was time for another trip to the town. Liora's face fell for just a moment. She remembered the cold square, the staring faces, the feeling of being unwanted. She looked down at her beautiful wooden legs. Elias understood her fear without her having to say a word. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. He told her it would be different this time. He said they would go together, and they would show everyone how wonderful she was. The journey down the mountain was a new adventure. Where before Elias had carried a silent, trembling burden, now he walked beside a chattering, energetic girl. Liora moved with a determined grace, her wooden braces making soft clicking sounds against the stone path. She would stop to point out an interesting beetle or a patch of unusual flowers. She was not a prisoner of her body anymore. She was its commander. When they finally arrived at the edge of the town, people noticed them immediately. Whispers began to follow them like a trailing breeze. They saw the mountain man, the recluse, but he did not look like a ghost anymore. He stood tall, and there was a new lightness in his step. And the girl. They all remembered the girl. They remembered her bent legs and downcast eyes. They remembered pitying her, or worse, dismissing her. But the child walking beside him now was utterly transformed. Her head was held high. A bright smile was on her face. Then something happened that made the whispers stop entirely. A yellow butterfly, just like the one on the mountain, danced across their path. Liora's eyes lit up with playful excitement. She forgot about the watching crowd. She forgot about her old fears. She saw only the butterfly. With a joyful cry, she leaped forward and began to chase it. She darted across the cobblestones of the town square, her legs moving with a strength and speed that left everyone stunned. She was not just walking. She was running, truly running, her braced legs carrying her as fast as any other child her age. The people in the square were shocked into a profound silence. They watched the miraculous scene unfold before them. The unwanted orphan was dancing with life. The lonely mountain man stood watching her, his face softened by a pride and love that was clear for all to see. The stern woman from the orphanage was there, and her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief that quickly melted into something else, something like awe and shame. Then, one person, an old woodcutter who knew the value of skilled craftsmanship, began to clap. It was a slow, steady sound that broke the silence. Another person joined him, and then another, until the entire square erupted in cheers and applause. It was not a noise of mockery or shock, but a thunderous wave of joy and celebration for the girl's incredible triumph. The sound of the cheering crowd faded behind them as Elias and Liora began their journey back up the mountain. The air was different now. It was not filled with the weight of pity or the chill of fear. It was light, and it carried a sense of peace. Liora walked with a new confidence, not just in her legs, but in her heart. She had faced the place of her deepest sadness, and had been met, not with scorn, but with joy. She had been seen for who she was, and she had been celebrated. Elias, too, felt the change settle deep within his soul. The silent approval of the townspeople, their stunned respect, did not matter to him nearly as much as the look on Liora's face did. He had not done it for them. He had done it for her. But in doing so, the last of the old, heavy chains that bound him to his lonely past seemed to fall away. The mountain was no longer a place to hide from the world. It was simply their home. He was no longer the lonely mountain man. He was Elias, Liora's father. Life in the little cabin bloomed into its fullest beauty. Liora's energy seemed boundless now that she could fully explore her world. Elias built her a swing from a strong piece of wood and sturdy rope, hanging it from the limb of the great oak tree. She would soar through the air, her laughter echoing against the cliffs, feeling truly free. He taught her the things he loved. They read books together by the fire. He showed her how to identify the tracks of deer and rabbits in the soft earth. He even taught her how to whittle, guiding her small hands as she learned to carve her own shapes from wood. Starting with a simple fox for her growing collection, the cabin, once so quiet, was now filled with the sounds of their life together. The crackle of the fire, the rustle of book pages, the sound of Liora's stories and questions, and sometimes the deep, rumbling sound of Elias's laughter. It was a sound he had almost forgotten he could make. They were a perfect team. He gave her safety and strength. She gave him joy and a reason to smile. They had healed each other in ways no one else could. They lived a very happy life together, high up on their mountain. Elias and Liora had both been alone in the world, two lost pieces from different puzzles. But they had found each other. They fit together perfectly, creating a new picture, a complete picture. It was the picture of a family. And in that family, both the lonely man and the unwanted girl found the one thing they had always needed most. They found a love that would last forever. The end.